This is Dave, and I'm here with Ethan, and together we are Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast, episode 230-inch.
On this episode, we interviewed J.M. Kehoe, property master for the award-winning film Weird the Al Yankovic Story.
It's Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
It's a podcast about Weird Al.
It's Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
Seriously, the whole podcast is about Weird
It's
Al.
Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
You don't have to listen, but we're glad you are.
Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
Well, hello, everybody.
Hello. Well, so Dave, now that we are in year 6 of our podcast, what should we focus on?
Ooh, good question. How about we talk about Weird Al?
Sure, that works for me.
Well, we wanted to say thank you to everyone who commented or reached out about episode 229-inch, where we recapped our trip to Columbus, Ohio for a screening of Weird the Al Yankovic Story and accompanying Q&A with Eric Appel and Nina West.
And thanks to our new friend Amy from Spoonful Records in Columbus, Ohio, for sharing the picture that she took of us and sent to Nina West over in our Facebook group.
It was so much fun getting to attend that event and then relive it. I cannot wait for more Weird Al related fun this summer.
Well, don't get too far ahead of yourself, because right now it's time for What's Happening in Weird Al Related News!
The New Yorker has posted their official video for the New Yorker Festival last fall, where Andy Borowitz interviewed Weird Al live on stage in New York City.
The video includes a few highlight moments from the 1-hour event in its 5-minute runtime, although they did unfortunately cut out the most important part of the whole event!
Yeah, the part where Andy Borowitz said his friend Ethan Ullman has a Weird Al podcast and is in the audience right now, to which Weird Al said, "Hi, Ethan," is mysteriously missing.
Thankfully, the video was partially salvaged with a few audience shots featuring our very own Dave Elvis Rossi and our very own Ethan Ullman's very own 2000-inch hat.
If you want to hear more about the full event and all the Weird Al related goodness from before and after the event, please check out episode 208-inch of Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast for our full review.
Paramount Plus shared news that Weird Al will guest in Season 2 of their original animated series, Transformers Earthspark, voicing the spacefaring Autobot Cosmos.
Weird Al has a long history with Transformers, having previously voiced Wreck-Gar in Transformers Animated, as well as his original song, Dare to Be Stupid, appearing in both Transformers the movie as well as on the soundtrack.
Weird Al will be joining an excellent cast of voice actors, including the grizzled narration voice of Weird Al from Weird the Al Yankovic Story, Diedrich Bader, who plays cyborg mad scientist Mandroid.
The first 9 episodes of Transformers Earthspark will premiere on Friday, June 7th, exclusively on Paramount in the US and Canada, and on June 8th in the UK, Australia, and Italy, and additional territories to be announced at a later date.
This episode is brought to you in part by Vegan Burrito Restaurant Burrito, home of the 2-pound double wrapped in quesadilla Burrito, and Wizard Burger in Albany, New York. Come on down to Burrito and Burrito your Burrito, and Wizard Burger for mouthwatering loaded, dare I say beefy, vegan burgers. From Albany to Uranus, Burrito and Wizard Burger feed the hungry with out-of-this-world plant-based real food, always vegan style. Visit burritosquare.com and wizardburger.com to order ahead.
Past guest and friend of the podcast, Joe Bohannon, reports that a Weird Al-related clue appeared in the Sunday, May 12th edition of the LA Times crossword puzzle.
The clue for 94 Down was Straight Outta Linwood Singer.
While the answer they were looking for was Weird Al, we also think Lisa Popeil, Angie Jerry, Kim Aaron, Monique Donnelly, Scotty Haskell, David Joyce, or Randy Crenshaw should have been accepted as well, as they each lent their vocals to at least one track on Straight Outta Linwood.
With all of the excitement building for the 4K Ultra HD Shout Factory release of UHF on July 2nd, we were wondering if there would be any other special releases for UHF's 35th anniversary across the pond.
We reached out to Umbrella Entertainment in Australia, who had previously released both Weird the Al Yankovic Story and the Vidiot from UHF, if they would be releasing a 4K Ultra HD edition this year, but unfortunately they let us know that they have no plans to do so.
We'll be sure to let you know if we hear about any other international UHF releases.
Now it's time to check out what's happening in Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast related news.
It has come to our attention that once again, our podcast was used as a primary source for one of Lily Hirsch's books.
Her new book, Taking Funny Music Seriously, will be released officially on July 2nd. But if you check out the preview pages on Google Books, you will see Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast mentioned as Lily references our interview with the great Dr. Demento.
Being cited as a source in significant works of writing is nothing new for Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast, of course, as not only were we heavily featured in the expanded edition of Weird Al Seriously by Lily Hirsch, we were also the source of many facts about Weird Al for Darwin, Minnesota Mayor Josh Johnson's son's prestigious school report all about Weird Al.
Last episode, we mentioned that we are celebrating the 35th anniversary of UHF with a live reading of the UHF script on July 27th over Zoom.
Friend of the podcast, William King, is organizing the event with us and has cast every part thanks to everyone in our Facebook group at group.2000inch.com sharing their interest in participating.
If you are not on Facebook, but you are still interested in joining in the fun, we can still squeeze you into a role. Or if you just want to make sure you're there to watch it live, be sure to email frank@2000inch.com ASAP.
And finally, we wanted to thank and give a shout out to Mike at Binko Brewing for mailing us labels for his Weird Ale, A-L-E, home brew.
While their beer is not available for sale, you can follow their journey and see the amazing original artwork for Binko Brewing's various beers on Instagram by following them at Binko Brewing.
That's B-I-N-K-O Brewing.
Now it's time for this episode's interview. Take it away, Ethan.
Dave and I are absolutely thrilled to welcome to the podcast the property master from Weird the Al Yankovic Story. Please welcome to the podcast, J.M. Kehoe. How's it going, J.M.?
Hi. Thanks for having me. How you guys doing?
We are doing absolutely great, and we're really thrilled to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
Before we get into anything, I think it would be good. Ethan and I are not really in the film business, so this might be old news to people who are, but what exactly is a property master?
So a property master is basically anything an actor touches, and that is sort of the defined role of what we do. We acquire things, we make things, we source things. From anything from graphics, we work with all the people in the art department and the set decorators, costumes, makeup. We deal directly with the writers, directors, showrunners to get things approved, and have 10 different types if possible. A common rule of props is if you have one, then you have none. But sometimes you only have one, and you got to kind of wing it a lot of times. But it's a lot of fun. It's a great job.
So before we even get to Weird, how did you get started as a property master?
So I grew up in the New York area. So my first year of college, I was in a school called Five Towns College, where I was. It was in a town called Dix Hills, and I went there for 1 year, and it was in an abandoned or reacquired middle school, or elementary school rather, and it was so all the desks were really tiny, and
all
the urinals and toilets were really tiny. So it was like a very funky little school that was pretending to be like a bootleg NYU. Sorry, Five Towns College. So they actually put me in their commercial. I was walking around one day, and we had this lovely teacher who she actually won an Academy Award for editing.
Oh, wow.
Best edited short film.
Oh, nice.
Which is a big accomplishment. But she saw me and she's like, outside smoking a cigarette. She's like, "Hey, you want to be in a commercial?" And I'm like, "What? Oh, okay." And then they gave me like $300, and I was like the poster child for Five Towns College very briefly, which, you know, I dropped out of that school the following year and moved on. But I did work in props in their theater department briefly and volunteered there. And then I moved down to Tennessee, went to school down there. Was peripherally involved. I got into my first paid gig, which was a Purina dog food commercial.
Okay.
And I was a puppy wrangler for that, which was incredible. It was like the best possible introduction. I was like getting my first like paid film work, and here I am playing with like baby bulldogs and like all these like, this is incredible. So you know, that led to I got linked up with a couple people that we just like I'm still friends with to this day, and still we made a bunch of funny videos. Some of them are on YouTube. Don't look them up, they're really embarrassing. We did a knockoff of an iPod commercial. It was really bad. Yeah, I just came after I graduated. I moved back up north. I've always been a extreme, not super extreme, not as extreme as some people, but like collector. I love toys. I love games. I love little nuanced little things, and that was always like my big passion. And so I got an opportunity to intern. It was an unpaid internship on a movie called Girl in the Park, which was starring Sigourney Weaver and Kate Bosworth. And that was in New York City, where I was assigned the role as props intern, which, you know, I mean, I was working with a couple really pretty big prop masters now. One of them is a really big deal, and you know, does like a lot of big deal movies, a lot of Spielberg stuff now, and was sort of thrown to the wolves, and didn't really know what I was doing, which is a common thing for a lot of people that are new to film and working on film. But you know, you just did it, and I remember I got a phone call that was the one of the prop assistants, Ryan Webb. He said, "You're going to get a phone call. Just answer it. It's a guy named Sandy, and just do what he asked." And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, you know, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I'm like, okay, sounds good. And so I talked to this guy Sandy, and he's like, okay, I need you to go up to Harlem. You're going to meet a guy. He's going to have a karate uniform and some peacock feathers. And then I need you to go down to the seaport and find a vintage Porsche key. And then you're going to go and find like a Bluetooth speaker. And this was like 2006. So Bluetooth wireless speakers weren't super common at that time, but they existed. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I meet up with this guy at his house in Soho, and I drop it off, and I'm like looking around in his house, and I'm like, wait a second, what is this? And it turned out that it was the prop master for all of Wes Anderson's films.
Oh, wow.
Sandy Hamilton.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I was shopping without knowing it for the movie Darjeeling Limited, where he was leaving to go to India, and like a few days after I had helped him with these errands. And so some of those props were in that movie, which Wes Anderson was a very big influence for me to get involved in film. Bottle Rocket is still like very high in my lists of top favorite movies. I kind of like got the itch after that and wanted to stick with it. And
wow.
I bounced around a little bit in departments just to kind of solidify, and I didn't make the full transition into prop mastering until a little bit later. But I kind of just rode that first internship into my next paid gig, which was this was paid. The last one wasn't paid.
Right.
But this next one was paid, which was I had to move to the Yale New Haven campus, and that was to work on the worst of them, but still really amazing experience. Indiana Jones films.
Amazing.
So I was just a production assistant on that. So I worked on Crystal Skull, and they just did up the whole Yale campus. There's the scene with Shia and Harrison, and they're like cruising around on motorcycles, and they go into the diners, and it's all like 50s stuff, and just a really, really cool experience.
That is awesome.
My favorite story to tell about that one is actually that was the same year that the iPhone 1 was released, and my assignment was to find George Lucas, Harrison Ford, Kathleen Kennedy, and one of the other producers, Steven Spielberg, iPhone accessories, because they were given early released iPhones directly from Steve Jobs.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Which I'm like, wait, you want me to do what? Like, how am I going to find things that don't exist on the market? And my tail between my legs, like, here, Mr. Spielberg, I got your iPhone case. So, and he's helicoptering in from his house in the Hamptons every single day that he was filming there. So you sometimes see the like helicoptering coming in, and you're like, there he is. And
wow.
The town was a complete buzz. And somehow I talked to a local Apple store, and I was like, guys, you're not going to believe me, but I need iPhone cases for Steven Spielberg, Harrison Ford, and George Lucas. And they're like, what the freak are you talking about? And so they ended up being like some obnoxious colored, like neon blue ones, and just some wacky things. But I actually hand delivered Harrison Ford, Steven Spielberg, and George Lucas's first ever iPhone cases.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I'm going to use that excuse next time I need something at the Apple store. I'll be like, actually, it's for George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, and Harrison Ford.
Yeah. So,
wow.
that was like in line with where I was headed. And so I knew that acquiring things and stuff like that was always like one of my favorite things to do. And from there, I got pretty lucky. My next gig was on Martin Scorsese's Shutter Island, which I traveled up to Boston, and I got into what's called the art department, which, it sounds like you're making like, art all day, but it's not totally that. It was more like me making sure that coffee and everything lunches were taken care of, and making sure that drawings and things were delivered every single day. And back at that time, I had slipped on some ice and dislocated my finger, and I didn't have health insurance at the time, so I ignored it. And I just was like, no, I got a Scorsese gig. Like, I can't mess this up. I gotta get there. And I was actually Dante Ferretti's personal assistant for a while, who is one of the most acclaimed production designers on the planet. If you look him up, his work is just incredible. And so I got to work directly with him while simultaneously ignoring my traumatic finger injury, which was, I ignored and ignored and ignored. And it was a full-on 15 hours a day in the middle of the winter, making sure that everybody was like getting what they needed for the art department, until one day we had Stephanie, I can't remember her last name, but she was in charge of all the plants on the production. And she saw my finger, and she was like, "What is that?" And I was like, "Oh, it's nothing." And she was like, "No, take off your little CVS bandage right now. I want to see what this is."
Jeez.
And my finger was just like, it was completely black. It was like as black as the night sky.
Ooh.
And she was like, "You're going to the hospital. I don't care. I'm telling your boss." And I had to have prompt finger surgery after that.
Man.
So just like more war stories of all of that.
Crazy.
And you would have just kept on going if she
I
didn't
would have
step
kept
in.
going until the thing fell off. I mean, I was just like,
Oh man.
it was. I have stories for days about that movie, and that whole experience. It was a wild one. But I got to work on a really, really cool piece of film, and I met a group of prop people that were extremely influential to me. Scott Getzinger, Duke Scopa, and Kathy Scorsese, who was Marty's daughter, is Marty's daughter. And they were on the props. And
Wow.
Those guys were just, I was like, because I was still trying to figure out, like, which department I'm going to land in. What do I really want to do? Like, where do I fit in? As most young people do. And I just thought those guys were the coolest. I was like, holy cow, like they get to do this like incredible research, and they're, like from little gum wrappers and matchbooks and all sorts of cool stuff. And I just was enthralled by everything that they did. And Scott was a big proponent of me, getting into props. Scott was a major influence. He'd see me every day and he'd be like, "You got to get on set. You got to get on set." And I'm like, "How do you do that? Like, I don't know. Who do I talk to? Like, I'm talking to you." He's like, "Well, it's a union job. So, you have to go through the applications and networking and blah, blah, blah." And so, it took me a while to actually figure out how to do that, but I stayed within the art department. After Shutter Island happened, we had the unfortunate first go of the first writer's strike in 2008, and followed by the financial crisis.
Oh,
man. And then I had tons of debt from the finger surgery that I didn't have insurance for. So I didn't know what I was doing, but I just loved film. I loved working in film and TV, and I had to keep pushing. So I ended up finding myself back in New York City, where I had my first apartment, which was in a abandoned sweater factory, very, very far out. Now there is a pizza place there that is very like bougie and hipstery, and people go there. But when we lived there, I was paying like $300 a month, and which is unheard of in New York City nowadays. And there was like
that deal.
there was like so much crime there. We lived across the street from a rave house. It was like a dump. And so, but I ended up working on, I got lucky again and linked up with the people on Boardwalk Empire, the HBO show, where I worked with them for years. I ended up getting into the set decoration department, and I was given honors for their win in the Emmy. One of their many Emmys for the art department for production design. So I did receive like a little plaque from them, which was still one of my like proudest achievements, is that I received Emmy honors within the set decoration department.
JM, your origin story is fascinating. I love that you've got to work with all these great people and on all these great projects. Now, I think there's probably only one thing that's a little bit better than working with George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, and that is getting to work with Eric Appel and Weird Al Yankovic on Weird the Al Yankovic Story. How did you get involved with that project?
Yes. So that one it kind of came out of nowhere. and I was called by my good friend Carolyn Stratton, who is also a prop master, and she said, I have this job, and it's very quick paced. You're not going to have a lot of time to figure it out, and you're going to have to kind of like go for it. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm on this other job right now, but maybe if you tell me what it is, I might consider jumping ship. And she said, well, it's the Weird Al biopic. And I was like, it was kind of record screech, and I was like, wait a second, what did you just say? This is the Weird Al biopic? She's like, yes, it's starring Daniel Radcliffe. You basically have 5 days of prep, and then it's like 17 days of shooting. And I mean, for props, that's kind of unheard of. It's becoming more and more common, just as budgets get a little tighter and restrictions and everything like that. But as soon as I heard that, I said, you know what? This is an amazing opportunity. I told the people, I was working on a show called Dead to Me at the time, which was in its last week and a half of shooting.
Oh, wow.
And which was an incredible show. It was an incredible experience working with Christina and everybody. And I told my team, I said, guys, I just got called to work on the Weird Al movie with Daniel Radcliffe and Eric and Weird Al and everybody. And they all looked at me, and it was just like, you know, they bugged out. They were like, oh my God, what? We have to leave. We're like, no, we can't leave this job. We're in the middle of shooting. We're about to finish it. Like, we have to finish this job. And my assistant, Richie Hahn, we were working out of my garage one day, and he's like, you better take that job. You're going to regret it if you don't take that job. And so I basically called Dan, the production designer. My friend Carolyn gave me Dan's phone number, and I said...
Dan Butts.
Dan Butts, the legend Dan Butts. And I said, I want to do this movie. And he's like, okay, great. So you start tomorrow. I can't exactly. And you have 24 hours to get all the props. Bye. It didn't exactly happen like that. Dan was just completely amazing to work with. And he was like, okay, you know, he kind of went into all the details of the project, and I was just really like immersed into it really quickly, which was just so exciting. I had my other assistant that I brought over was a good friend back from New York named Kyle Salvatore, who was he was pretty fresh off the boat, if you will, from his journey from New York. Mm-hmm. But he's always worked in music areas and things like that, so I knew he was going to be really perfect fit for that job. And yeah, I had to leave Dead to Me sort of suddenly, and I took a very big pay cut to do the Weird Al movie, which it was so exciting. I was thrilled. I like, yeah, okay. I mean, money's money, but this is something I gotta do it. And I loved it. I loved every minute of it.
Yeah. When a Weird Al project comes along, you just drop everything and you have to go and do it. I mean, that's just the rules. I think you made the right choice there.
That is the rule. That is the rule. That is absolutely true.
And just think, if you didn't leave Dead to Me, you wouldn't be on our podcast right now. I mean, this is probably the greatest honor, I'm sure.
That's absolutely true. I mean, I don't know of any Dead to Me podcasts going on.
So I'm curious, Jan, when you get a call like this from Dan or whoever, do they give you like a list of props that say go out and find this? Do you have a budget for like the entire props that you need to find or create, or is it like each prop has its own budget? How does this all work?
So it really varies from project to project. For this particular project, I had a Target gift card for $50, and They gave me the script and said, "Good luck." No, they were really cool about the budget. So I was brought onto the project and was given basically, I think it was 7 days of prep, which on a typical project, like a bigger project, you're going to get a minimum of 6 weeks of prep.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Especially for a feature, you might, like, for example, if you're working on like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or something, which that was, I think, 6 months of prep, and I've had jobs where it's been months and months of prep.
Wow.
Just to nail everything. But this one, Dan had been prepping it. I think he said he started sometime before the holidays, and I was brought onto the project at the very end of January. So I'm handed a script typically, and what I do is I read the script like 3 or 4 times. I have every prop master has their own sort of attempt at what they call a breakdown, which is you go scene by scene and pick out all the different props and different elements that are going to be in the scenes.
And so for that pass, are you looking for props that are specifically mentioned in the script, or are you also brainstorming like, oh, it's a diner, so we're going to need a ketchup bottle, or what does that look like?
So that process is, I mean, you that's one of the skills of a prop master, I think, is that you have to, like, diner scene, like, you go through the list and you're like, okay, we need napkin, you work directly with the set decorator and you make your own list. You obviously, like, the big hero elements, you better have the right ones, which is a process of, there's a show and tell process. There's a lot of pictures that get sent via email or text. There's a lot of, like, discussion about specific things. And then, like I said earlier, you have to have different options for most circumstances. So it starts with a breakdown. It starts with a brainstorming of just kind of like fleshing out the whole big thing. And then kind of, with a project that's very run and gun, you have to kind of literally take it scene by scene. You look at what's called the one-liner, which I'm sure Newman mentioned. And, ADs provide the one-liner, and they also provide a background breakdown. So you'll have an idea of how many people are going to be there. The transportation department will tell you how many cars will be there for license plates or any things that need to be in the cars. And then you have to figure out if it's going to be real food. We're just using the diner as an example. Yeah. Fake food, or, if stunts is involved. Costumes, if there's, like, things that are going to be messy. So it's just like a really all-encompassing process.
Wow.
But yeah, it starts with a breakdown, and you kind of just go scene by scene by scene and sort of match up what your priorities are. For Weird, the biggest priorities were of course the accordions and the instruments.
Right.
Of course, yeah.
We had to nail those. We had to do our best that we possibly could. Which Dan actually, he started the legwork of that prior, and he linked up with a lovely gentleman up in somewhere in the San Fernando Valley. I can't remember exactly where it was. Maybe it was Simi Valley. Dave's Accordions, who shout out to Dave's Accordions. He was just a lovely guy to work with. I know Al has worked with him in the past, and Dan had a good relationship building with him. And that was the first thing that I had to just figure out. Dan had one accordion picked out, but I think I ended up needing 6 total accordions, 2 to smash, and then 4 hero accordions.
Wow. And is that 4 different ones, or is that 4 meaning the backups are included in that number?
So, like I said before, in props, the motto is, if you have one, you have none. And so I had we had two of the hero ones that were, one was like slightly different because these are all vintage accordions. Accordions are very, very expensive, new, especially ones that would be of the caliber of Weird Al playing. So we had to be really budget friendly and budget conscious, and Dave had just amazing prices for our accordions. And I think we had two of the hero black ones. We had the student one, we had the breakaway one, and then we had I think we had one other accordion that I can't when they do the hand shot where they're all raising the accordions into frame. Yeah, that was our additional accordion too. But yeah, I mean, budget is always a big thing because budget is what can make or break you in your next job. If you go tremendously over budget, producers and things will be like, no, this guy went insanely over budget, and we have to find somebody that's going to be more budget conscious. That is like one of the byproducts of, but that happens with every department. It happens with costumes, set deck, makeup, everybody, camera.
Sure.
So, that's part of our job, is to make sure that we provide the best, most affordable, most of the times, approach to acquiring these things.
You mentioned the approval process is a lot of texting and emails of pictures. Are you sending it to Eric and Al to approve? Are you sending it to Dan and then he sends it? Or is Dan the final say? What is the actual process there when it came to Weird?
So we used, basically what a prop master does is, during your prep period, the ADs will schedule what they call a show and tell, which, I'm sure you guys remember doing show and tells as a kid. It's very similar, but way more intense. And we had a prop house that we use out in Los Angeles called History for Hire, that Pam, she and her husband are the owner, and Pam and Jim, they're just amazing, amazing people. And they were so gracious to let us use their space to have the lovely people at Funny or Die and Roku and Eric, the DP and Dan and the AD. They all came to History for Hire, which Pam actually got us sandwiches, and she had a whole thing and set up, and we went around and picked out everything that we thought was going to be something that we'd love to show everybody, and kind of you go through scene by scene. And that's sort of honestly, it's kind of still like a first pass, but it gives Eric and everybody else a visual cue of okay, this is what we're leaning towards. If you have any other notes, let me know. And we will do our best to facilitate that. If there's a specific model of guitar or strap or guitar picks or amps or license plates, the coffee can that she has her money to pay the accordion salesman, books and backpacks, all sorts of everything that you can imagine. And you go scene by scene. Obviously everybody, time is of the essence. So sometimes you don't get the opportunity to show every single prop because sometimes things have to get fabricated,
right?
And that's a whole process. So, you do your best. You do your best to show people. And I think Pam helped us out. Kyle built everything out, my assistant, and with me, and we picked everything out. And, I remember being extremely nervous, but we did a great job. We got Kyle, like I said, was amazing with instruments and music equipment and really helped. We did a lot of running as fast as you can research on a lot of those instruments that everybody played and the amps and all sorts of stuff. And then, after that show and tell happens, it's usually followed up with emails and texts and,
right.
and approvals. And, that's a very timed out thing. And you never want to absorb too much time because then it's kind of you have to be really careful because you don't want to distract from what's
Right,
going on. It's
right.
just it's one component,
Sure.
but even though it could be like very critical to the story.
So obviously, you spend some time sourcing these accordions at the Dave's Accordion store, and then you spend some time at the prop house, going through and picking out things. So at that point, are you like basically when you're at the prop house, you're just renting these props? Are you buying them? How does that work? And who owns these props? Like who owns the accordions and who owns like the salt and pepper shaker from the diner? To go back to the diner, that sort of stuff.
So generally what happens is the prop houses, we do try to rent things often, as often as possible, because a lot of times it creates overhead for and you end up having a lot of things that aren't necessarily assets for the show, like the salt and pepper shakers, because then it costs the production storage, money, and then you're like, okay, are we holding on to these like all this stuff? Like, what are we doing with this stuff? So a lot of times with a production like this, if something's more affordable to rent than to buy, especially with period elements where it's supposed to be in the 80s,
Right.
Rather than sourcing things under our time constraints, if we couldn't find it locally, it kind of was going to be a challenge to, say, buy it on eBay and then have it shipped in time.
Right. Because you'd literally, if you have a week, you got to hope that guy puts it in the mail. You got to hope your mailman, puts it on the truck. Oh, man.
Exactly. So there was a couple of props that I actually remember we purchased, and the specifically in the Scotty Bros, the tape player that's on their desk, that was an eBay purchase, and it was in perfect condition. We had looked locally in Los Angeles and all over the place, Craigslist, Facebook, wherever you can kind of source things, all the prop houses, ISS, History for Hire, Picture Star Props, and trying to find this very cool looking tape player for the My Baloney, for Scotty Bros, and we found the perfect one on eBay. And you're in charge of like deciphering like where you put the money basically as a prop master, and very rarely do producers or anything question your expenditures, unless it's like something insane. You're like, what you spent $15 million on bubble bath? What's the matter with you? Which I've never done. But so we had this, we found this tape player, and I contacted the seller, who I think was based out of Ohio. And I was like, look, I need this thing yesterday. And that's a common phrase that we use. Yesterday is the key word to props. And so I actually, he had an offer up. I can't remember the exact price. I think it was like $300. I was like, I'll give you $350 plus the shipping cost to get this thing overnighted.
Wow.
And he sometimes those guys don't message you back. They're like, but he actually gave me his phone number. I talked to him on the phone. And he was like, okay, yeah, let's do it. And I got that thing, and it was a beautiful prop. It's one of my favorite props, but it was also my most like frustrating prop too, because there's when they play the tape, the little dial where it's supposed to give like a numerical reading on the what do you call that, the like ticker for the volume, it didn't work, and I was so mad. I was so mad. Nobody noticed it, but I noticed.
But you noticed it.
I still notice it to this day. I'm like, this stupid thing. Oh gosh. But yeah, I mean that's the name of the game, especially with period things. Like it's and under tight budgetary constraints and time. Sometimes it's just you got to go with it, because that's the only option available.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing.
Wow. You mentioned that the tape deck was one of your favorite props. Are there any other memorable props that you can think of?
So, the Alice Cooper snake at the pool party.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite props, which didn't get It didn't get the right screen time, but I understand why, because it wasn't a real snake. But that snake was $125,000.
What?
Yes. That was my most expensive prop on the entire show.
Did you buy it for $125,000?
We rented it for one day, and it was, I think the rate on the snake was, it was like $2,000 a day to rent the snake.
Man.
And I think I negotiated them down to like $800 a day because we were going to use it only for half a day.
Okay.
And I'm like, who the hell's using a $125,000 snake that you can't cut me a little break here? Come on, guys.
There's not a waiting list for...
Yeah, nobody needed this snake on a Monday. And the snake weighed, I think it was like a 250-pound snake. So the snake was like...
Oh my gosh.
It was like this massive snake that was on a giant plank of wood that was all covered in like special saran wrap, and I had to go pick it up and put it in my Subaru and drive it down, and it was just, that was like so much fun when we got it there, because everybody, a lot of times, like behind the scenes, everybody finds their places to set up, and here we are, like, here's this giant rubber snake. I'm like, don't touch it. That thing's $125,000.
The snake costs more than your whole budget, probably.
Oh my God. Yeah. Times 10. I couldn't remember my exact budget, but it was not like a huge budget to work with. It was,
Yeah.
It wasn't nothing. It wasn't nothing. They knew that we had some big expenditures, and when you have overages and things like that, like renting a $2,000 a day snake, if it makes the scene, you have to get the snake.
Right.
And that's something that, you'll have, like, Eric, he'll go to bat for you, or Dan will go to bat for you, or Al will go to bat for you if you're like, nope, we need this snake.
And you can't just get an actual live snake, I'm guessing, because that adds a whole expense and liability, I'm sure.
Yeah, so a lot of times when it dips into like the animal wrangling realm, what ends up happening is it's a whole separate person that comes on board. There's often a period of time where they're training the actor to adjust to snakes or horses or whatever the animal is.
Right, yeah.
And so, like, it was probably the smartest thing for us to do at that time was, let's get a rubber one. And
an extremely expensive rubber one.
A really expensive rubber snake. But one of my favorite props by far.
So cool.
That whole pool day was that was like so much fun. That was, and I have a crazy story about the pool day, which, that was my most instrument heavy day.
Yeah, everyone has an instrument, but not just like guitars and drums. Like, everyone has a very bizarre instrument.
Yeah. So I mean, like with Emo and when he's playing Dolly with his fish, I had like,
right.
We had other options available. I had like a giant tuna that he was going to play more like a cello or a bass, and I had like tinier ones that were maybe going to at one point be like used as like horns or something, and. But and Emo, he was really awesome. He would call me and he's like, I think I found the perfect fish, and I'm like, okay, cool, like let's look at this, and like we just worked together and collaborated on the fish, and I ended up finding a really nice fish, which was so much fun.
I have to imagine you're not often collaborating with the actors on what they're going to use, but Emo is just such a special guy that he probably had a vision for it. Is that accurate?
He had a very, it's funny because, you don't get the opportunity to really collaborate with actors too much. But when you do, it's such a treat. It's really kind of cool. And obviously I'd say the biggest issue with collaborating with actors is maybe it's not necessarily in line with the director or the writer's, vision.
Right.
So you might be like, so you can't always follow what the actors say because they might they might want something different, and it doesn't go in line with what the vision of the film or the TV show is looking for. But when you do, I think everybody was on board with what Emo, and I was talking with Eric about Emo's fish and Dan about that, and just to make sure that it was going to be the right fish. So yeah, that was a really fun process though with that. So the pool party instruments were, so Al and Dan had created, Dan Butts and Al Yankovic had created a list of the instruments that was, I was on an email chain, and I had acquired a lot of these instruments that I'm like, okay, cool. Like, instruments are set. Like, this is great. I have everything I need. And the day of the pool party, we were on such a tight time frame with, Conan's availability, Jack's availability, all those guys. And it was just, we're fighting daylight because it's a whole daylight scene. And Al wanted to see all the instruments laid out, and we picked them all out for specific, like, this one goes here, this one goes here, this one goes here. And we came across the siren whistle, which I had a siren whistle. And Al looked at the siren whistle, and he was like, this isn't the siren whistle that I was imagining. And I'm like, okay, well, this is the siren whistle that I have right now, but I can definitely try to find, which siren whistle you're specifically looking for. Which, this was on a Monday, and we're in Tarzana, and we're like far out, and he pulls up a picture, and it's a siren whistle that's kind of shaped like a cone. It's like this metal cone that I'm sure he's used many, many times. And
right.
Finding that on a Monday, it was a Monday before a certain timeline, like, we all mad dashed to find this siren whistle that was specifically requested by Al. That I had a siren whistle, it just wasn't the right siren whistle. So I ended up, I made phone calls to rental houses. Do you have a siren whistle? Everybody's like, what is that? I don't even know what that is.
I'm sort of nodding along. I really don't know what you're talking about when you see siren whistles. That's not the train whistle, right?
It's not a train whistle. It's like it's very like cartoony sound. It's like a burr. I can't even do it. That was horrible. But it's such a cool, iconic sound, and I get it. When I heard it played, I was like, oh, I get it. Okay, this makes 100% sense. But finding this very specific, so, our job is also researching. So I found and this is all in minutes.
Right.
The only manufacturer left of siren whistles is based out of this company in Texas. So that leads me to, first I call all my rental houses. ISS, Independent Studio Services, doesn't have it. History for Hire doesn't have it. All of the music rental places on a Monday at 10 a.m. does not have this very specific siren whistle. So then you have the oh shit moment, which I called the factory, and I was like, okay, do you have any distributors that ship out to Los Angeles or anything in the area? And they told me, like, you might want to try this percussion store in a town called Monrovia, which was on the literal opposite end of Los Angeles. And it's actually kind of close to where I live. And I called this percussion store, and by whatever forces, they had gotten the exact siren whistle I was looking for, delivered on a Saturday, which wasn't supposed to happen until that Monday later in the day. And I was like, don't let anybody touch that siren whistle. I will. And I drove like a bat out of hell, 85 miles an hour the whole way. And I get there, and I'm like dripping sweat, and you see all these guys, and they're like, oh, these are cool drumsticks, like people hanging out at a percussion store in Monrovia. at 11 in the morning, you're like, they're sipping their coffee, like, ooh, I like this drum head. And you're like, I need a siren whistle right now. And it was the one. And so by the time I got back from the siren whistle caper, most of the guys had been shot out, and they had already filmed their scenes, and so I missed the bulk of some of the really fun stuff on set that day. But my crowning achievement was making sure that we got the right siren whistle.
Jam, you definitely have to send us a picture of this siren whistle. I know all of our listeners are going to want to see what it looks like.
Yes, absolutely. It's really a beautiful instrument. I think it's such an iconic sound, and I was happy to do what I was there to do and get the right prop, and it's such a for us it's a lot of small victories, and the biggest thing is sort of like it's like editing. It's like the less you notice the prop, the better the prop is.
So along the lines of the siren whistle or like the cassette tape player, are there any other, just incredible props that you had to track down or had to really go out of your way to figure out where to acquire?
We need to stop the interview right there, but we will be back next episode to conclude our interview with J.M. Kehoe.
While you wait for part 2 of his interview, check out Ghostbusters, a paranormal picture book written by JM over at Amazon.com or wherever excellent books are sold.
Ooh, that sound means we have a call on our 347 Spatula Hotline, the official hotline of Dave and Ethan's 2000H Weird Al podcast.
Well, all right, intern Frank, let's hear that message.
Dave, Ethan, it's UH Jeff. I hear that it's your podcast-versary. That's all I've heard. Okay, bye.
Thanks for the call, Jeff. Now, who would spread rumors like that?
I bet it was his wonderful cat, Chloe. Thank you both, because I assume Chloe was there too, for the well wishes, if that's what you were wishing.
Ooh, it sounds like we have another call on the 347 Spatula Hotline. Let's hear this one, intern Frank.
Hey, this is Claire calling in. I was just wondering, with almost a full day of Bermuda content, for those of us who don't have a full day to spare, what would you recommend as the top 3 must-listen Bermuda episodes? I must know. Thank you.
Ooh, thanks for the call, Claire. Narrow it down to only 3? Ooh, that's going to be tough.
Well, obviously, you should probably start with episode 228-inch, his most recent appearance, along with Kenneth Gwinnett.
Then follow it up with episode 226-inch, and follow that with episodes 181-inch, 182-inch, and episode 183-inch.
Well, she said 3, so how about episode 166-inch, and can't miss episodes 136-inch and 137-inch.
Also episodes 104-inch and 105-inch, and episodes 82-inch and episode 83-inch.
And rounding out the top 3, you can't forget episode 67-inch and 68-inch, plus, episode 27-inch, 16-inch, and episode 10-inch.
And the entire Black and White and Weird All Over bonus series, where we go page by page and picture by picture with Bermuda through his first book.
Well, that was kind of hard for us to narrow down, but hopefully it helped you out. Thanks for the great question, and thanks for listening.
This episode is brought to you in part by Discover Darwin, promoting tourism in Darwin, Minnesota. Not only is historic Darwin, Minnesota beautiful, it's also pearly white.
While Darwin, Minnesota has nearly everything you need year-round, we here at Discover Darwin are willing to admit there are some instances in life where you may need to step outside of the Darwin, Minnesota city limits.
One of those occasions happens at least twice per year when you visit your dentist. The closest full-service dental office that isn't in the shed behind Rusty's shack is Dassel Dental.
Dassel Dental dentists definitely do decidedly dependable dental deeds.
Duh.
If anyone from Dassel Dental is listening, we keep trying to get in touch with someone at your marketing department.
We here at Discover Darwin think it would help the people of Darwin feel safer in the despicable and horrendous town of Dassel if instead of giving out rolls of dental floss, you give your patients mini twine balls to floss with.
So visit Darwin, Minnesota on your next toothy expedition. Discover Darwin, more than just the twine ball. And after you visit Darwin, Minnesota, be sure to attempt to visit www.discoverdarwin.biz.
Dave and Ethan's 2000 Inch Weird Al podcast is brought to you absolutely free thanks to our incredible sponsors, Burrito, Wizard Burger, our very own Jackson Scoggins, and Discover Darwin. Our podcast is also supported by everyone else in our Patreon family, with special thanks to our very own close personal friend level Patreon supporters, Zach, Kev, Casey, Allison, Adriana, Gus and Alicia, Ron, Zeb, Dana B, Jeff, Blair, Kenneth, Ajax, Javier, Nancy, Scotto, Matt, and also thanks to Jeremy and everyone else in our pretty stinking majestic Patreon family.
If you enjoy our minty fresh Weird Al podcast as heard in the Weird Al Yankovic Story commentary track, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/2000inch. There are awesome benefits like getting your name on the podcast, your own private RSS feed, which gives you early access to each and every bonus episode, and the self-satisfaction of doing something important with your otherwise pitiful, meaningless existence.
And don't forget to check out our official merchandise over at shop.2000inch.com. All proceeds from purchases go directly towards supporting our fine podcast. Plus, we love hearing from our listeners and other Weird Al fans, so be sure to join our Facebook community over at group.2000inch.com and visit our Discord server for even more riveting Weird Al and Red Rump the Goody related conversations. You can find both of them linked on our website, as well as information about past episodes and guests over at 2000inch.com or weirdalpodcast.com.
Keep up on new episodes, podcast news, and events by following at 2000inch on Facebook, X, Threads, and Instagram. And be sure to subscribe everywhere you listen to podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. Not only does subscribing help the podcast, be sure to let your doctor know if you're pregnant or might become pregnant. Plus, we also love it when we receive voicemail via official patent-pending 27-hour-a-day podcast hotline 347 Spatula, as seen in the Illustrated Al, The Songs of Weird Al Yankovic. That number is 347-772-8852. Give it a call or a text, and you might even hear your message in a future episode.
Thank you once again to our guest, J.M. Kehoe, for joining us this episode. We'd also like to thank Amy Kesting, Joe Bohannon, William King, Mike at Bingo Brewing, Claire Walsh, U.H. Jeff Nucera, Kenneth Gwinnett, Javier Valdez, and our very own Jackson Scoggins. Thank you to the Grammy Award-winning Jim Chemo West for our incredible podcast theme song, and thank you to the magnificent Weird Al Yankovic, as this podcast probably would not exist without him. And a big thank you to all of you, our loyal listeners, subscribers, Patreon supporters, and sponsors, and everyone else who makes our podcast possible.
Be sure to tune in next episode for the exciting conclusion of our interview with J.M. Kehoe. Thank you for choosing Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast. And until next time, remember to gill and chill, keep listening to Weird Al, and stay cheesy. With all these Weird Al-related clues popping up in crossword puzzles, it got me thinking, we should make our very own Weird Al-themed crossword puzzle.
That is a great idea, but I have already written one.
Oh, really? You haven't shared it with me.
Well, it's not really complete yet.
Oh, well, I'd love to hear what you got and maybe help you work on it.
Okay. Well, bear with me. I've only written 2 clues so far.
Well, that's a great start. Definitely more than I thought you'd have. Well, hit me. What's the first clue?
Number 27 across. 4 letters. Tough biker number 7.
Well, that's got to be Dave, D-A-V-E, Cha-ching. What's the second clue?
Number 27, down, 5 letters, tough biker number 8.
Wait, so it starts with a D?
No, but the 4th letter is an A.
Ethan? E-T-H-A-N?
Oh, yeah. Let's go with that. I like that much better than the answer I originally had.
That was Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast, episode 230-inch.
Recommended by 4 out of 5 dental hygienists.
So you start tomorrow, and you have 24 hours to get all the props. Bye. I need a siren whistle right now!